Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Tim Longo, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, when I look at him, well, it's like looking in a mirror.
Tim Longo.
Okay, of course, I'm not actually Tim Longo. I'm Brett Duville.
Oh, boy.
But, maybe you should... some the folks who follow us on Twitter already know.
Oh, no. Did you put it on Twitter?
I did.
I have not seen yet. Happy Halloween, everybody. We're recording on Halloween.
What could be scarier than to go to a meeting and to see yourself?
Yep, as my wife put it, hashtag commit to the bit is what Brett did today, much to my chagrin. So, do you want me to describe it for the people?
Yeah,
who haven't seen it?
I want you to describe it because you are the one who experienced.
Yeah. So Brett.
So it's for Halloween.
It's for Halloween. His costume is the other Tim Longo. So he shaved his head, but not just shaved his head. He razored the top of his head, as I do as well, but left buzz cut around the sides, a la Picard, which is what my hairstyle is. I'm very proud of it. And then shaved off his beard and mustache and changed his profile on Discord for our morning meeting and put something behind his ears to make the ears stick out more. Yep. Which I've come to terms with that in this point of my part of my life, so I'm okay with that. They're like, kudos to you, sir. Kudos to you. And
the other thing I did that you may not have picked up on, I think other people noticed. I did a couple things. One is I specifically set my chin lower to change the shape of my face a little bit to be closer to yours. Yeah. I specifically posed it was exhausting, I have to say. Like an hour, we had a long meeting today, and at the end of the meeting, I was like, oh, my jaw is so sore. Because I was forcing it low, but not opening my mouth, which is kind of hard. And I would occasionally reach out and rub my chin the way you do.
Yeah, no, I noticed. I don't know if anyone else in the meeting noticed, but
some people noticed. Yeah, some people noticed. I know who noticed because I could see them noticing. So I had a really good time with that. So
you kind of, I think you're intentionally, bringing in your lips, pursing your lips the way that I do, and. I have a very long lower chin, or lower below my mouth. So it's kind of hard for you to emulate that, but you did it through perspective tricks and you had the downturned sides of your mouth, which I'm usually frowning in that way. It's a little weird, but But of course,
I can't believe it's taken me this long to think of this as a costume. So, but it was a good Halloween. Last year, you kind of talked up Halloween for the company, and people still came in costume today, but nobody had mentioned it.
I totally forgot, to be honest. I was focused on things. Yeah.
So anyway, good times. So that is how we're kicking off our Halloween episode with me looking like Tim, and giving you quite a fright today. So it was good times for me.
Well, you should explain the image you used for your profile in Discord and the one that you side by sided with to try to.
Oh right, yeah,
because it's podcast relevant.
Yeah, people have seen it if they're on the Twitter feed. But a few years back in what we call the AGs era, I sent Tim a T-shirt for Christmas that maybe the second year of the podcast, because he was saying AGs so much, and it was just an AGs T-shirt that he sent me a photo of him holding it up to his chest, and frowning at me. And that was my model to emulate. I have plenty of video and things like that I can use to get the haircut right. But to practice my face, that was and to do my ears, that was the image. So you can find that on the Twitter feed. Good times. I sent it I sent it to my father, and he replied, "Oh, good couple of pictures of Tim." So
yeah, it's cool. A gentleman I've never met.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not true. You met him.
Oh, I did. No, I did. That's right.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came to LucasArts.
Oh, so long ago, though.
I know, a long time ago. So anyway, I did look more like him now, or yesterday. Let's get to the games, shall we?
Yeah.
Thanks last week to Patrick Redding, and of course the week before to Clint Hawking, to finish off our Far Cry 2 series. It's time now to take a big leap forward to 2008.
Why don't we just go down the list of 2008? So We Fit will play next.
Welcome to our podcast about video games, about the impact and relevance of games from 2008.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our thing right now. We are turning to Dead Space, which, it's funny. I when you suggested, I was like, really? Is that, what's the impact of Dead Space? And then as soon as I started playing, I was like, oh yeah, this game was way more impactful than I realized. So I'm really glad you picked it. I know you were maybe talked into it a little bit by Artemage on your stream, but yeah, it's a whole thing. I will get into that, but we're not going to recap 2008 again because we literally just played another 2008 game. So we're not going to.
Didn't we have another?
All that.
Did we? No, I guess that was Dark Souls was 2005. Is this only our second 2008?
No. Dark Souls is 2011. It was more recent.
More recent.
So we were not going to go. That was like, oh, that's a bridge too far. You were like, oh, we can't be doing that.
Don't make a habit of that.
Yeah, we're not, and we're definitely not going to make a habit of it. But this game is way more. I was very surprised, really, that this game was as important. As soon as I started playing, I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that this kind of was pioneering. So I'm glad that we are, spending some time with it. I can't really find anything else from 2008. Just looking quickly at the list, there might be some in there, but looking through, I'm not like, oh yeah, that no. So I think this is just these happen to do these two games one after the other that are 2008.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get to those things later. I think we're not going to start out right there. But you wanted to talk a little bit about Visceral Games and EA's new IP initiative, I think is how you put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is memory banks, right? Which are for me not good. So, and as the disclaimer that we don't really do deep research, we are doing, a cursory search and memory banks. But anyway, there was a shift for EA around this era where, for those who were playing games throughout that time, the previous, say, 5 to 10 years, EA was very focused on established IP and licensing IP, right? Lord of the Rings, Godfather, Simpsons, like they were doing a lot of different things at that time. And that was basically their bread and butter. Those ones I just named were fairly random. There were more important ones than those, but but the Lord of the Ring ones actually is a bit of an infamous story for lots of reasons that, and some of them problematic reasons because it led to EA Spouse and things like that. So look those up for yourself. But they, I think rightly so. Well, I guess we can debate whether it was the right move or not, but I give them credit for at least trying. They made a shift at one point where they still were doing some licensed games, but they did decide to start doing more original IP in different genres that they weren't necessarily always, doing. And Dead Space was one of them. And they weren't all, I don't know, they might have all been around the same few years. I don't remember the timing of the others, but you have, I guess games that were critically well received. I think part of the challenge that they ended up going through is that they didn't, monetarily do that well. And so they did eventually go back to a lot of licensing, as we know with Star Wars and things. But
also acquisition was a big strategy for the company in the sort of, well, always, but especially in the early aughts. BioWare. They bought a lot of stuff as well. And they actually, after this sort of initiative, didn't deliver financially, they actually returned to that strategy as well. I mean, and I think this was the Riccatello era, as I recall.
Yep, it was Riccatello.
And so he had basically said, hey, we're going to take this in a new direction. This where we buy companies, what ends up happening is, we buy them, but then we kind of assimilate them into our culture, and that, loses the magic from those companies. Right. And so we're going to stop doing that, and we're going to invest in building new creative teams that can do this new content. So this was like a whole sea change for EA. And then of course it didn't super pay off. So they're like, well, I guess we'll go back to what we know, is kind of what happened, which is unfortunate, because I think a big part of it was also like 2008. Gosh, what happened financially in 2008? Like, I don't think it was really the fault of their strategy. I think that was just a tough time. And I think their original strategy actually would have held them, put them in good stead for 2000. It would have been stuff that people were comfortable with, that they would have spent time on, spent money on rather. They'd want known quantities in a time of uncertainty if they were going to be buying games at all. So like, it was just the wrong time, and that wasn't their fault by any means. Right. I mean, just kind of happened that they were delivering on all these bets that they made, in 2006 and 2007, basically. And unfortunately, they happened to land in 2008. So it's unfortunate, because it could have meant a totally different EA.
I think it's all, I mean, that the timing terrible. I think there's another element that, and this is armchair analytics from my side, or analysis from my side for sure, because there's I don't have an article to point you to or something, but so but I think the other part of it was, which they only ended up really doing with Dead Space, because it was arguably the most successful one that came out of it, and now there's even a remake coming out. They did 3 games in the series, so they kept it going. But one of the challenges with original IP, kicking off original IP, especially multiple ones at the same time, is to see that through, there has to be a commitment to keep going, and with a public company that is, I think, historically and somewhat notoriously very like, let's be conservative, kind of let's do the thing that makes the P&L work the best, right? Both in how they ship their games, as far as like, shipping on the date rather than when the game's ready, and those sorts of things, which we have plenty of examples there. But they abandoned, Mirror's Edge, kind of a critical darling. I think they did do a sequel, but much later, and so they didn't really kind of ride the wave of that. Dante's Inferno, Dead Space, they had some things they could have committed to and kept going on. But it's just from a shareholder and kind of bottom line perspective, it was hard to justify. But once you start this initiative, you're going to kind of, in my opinion, I think you should see it through. Because that iteration is where you get original IPs to really start shining, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You got to keep iterating on it. You can't just one and done and hope, But it's obviously expensive to do that, so you can't fault them to some degree.
Yeah, and their model was kind of expensive. That's why they invested in big IPs that would have a high return. Was the theory, I think, was like, okay, yeah, we're going to have these big teams who make the thing in that specific universe, whatever that license is, right? And, I don't know, from Harry Potter to whatever. Like, I mean, they've had Star Wars for the last however many years.
Harry Potter as well. They had for a while, until Warner Bros.
Yeah. So, I mean, they just kind of, and that was, their model for years and years. And when you do that, you're kind of, your strategy is like, okay, we bring the IP in, we know we're going to make X type of game. So we take our studio that makes that type of game and we put them on this. And there's not like a lot of pre-production where you spend time developing it, because the pre-production was the world building that made the license thing to begin with, right? It's, in the case of Star Wars, it's like all the stuff that George Lucas did or whatever, right? In the case of some other property, it's whatever Rowling did or whatever the movies did or whatever, and when you're starting a new IP, you're starting from scratch, right? You have to do all that work that you were basically just paying that somebody else did, right? You're just paying for the results of somebody else having done that work. So you could kind of hit the ground running a lot more. And when that's your strategy for building games and you suddenly switch to like, okay, we're going to new IP, you're not used to building it the way you have to build a new IP, which is to like start thinking about all that world building, like how does all this fit together, figuring out where the legs are going to come from, like how do you make multiple games in this thing, like how is it rich enough to support that. And I'm talking about this stuff, but this is literally your thing. So
no, it's you know plenty. You know just as much. But I mean, yeah, But the theory behind that is that they own the IP, right? It's like you created IP,
right? Exactly.
You own it, right? So the Star Wars is like
right. But my point is like that. It's expensive for them to build games because they're used to building them with a big, they're used to going in with a big team from day one and delivering on the game. But here you wouldn't want to do that, and I'm sure that these games were way more expensive than they needed to be. Had you built it with an idea of like, I am building a new IP, start with 4 people, and let them work on this for a year to figure out what the heck it is before we put real resources into it and kill a lot of them. Like it's a totally different thing to do. You really want a little team that is just like generating ideas, and, throwing 10 ideas out there and saying, you know what, this one, let's put $1 million into this one and see where it goes. Out of these 10 that we put in 10,000 a piece on, right? It's a totally different approach to sort of building things, and they were not well suited to it. So it was also just a tough thing for them to do, and then into a financial environment where that was not going to pay off. They're also doing it mid-cycle. Like there's so many things that are really against the conventional wisdom for a company like EA. So I applaud their attempt, and just think it was unfortunate choice for them. Like, man, I wish we lived in the world where EA had kept going down that path. Personally.
Well, and there's an amortization that should happen too, which they did. They were able to do with Dead Space because they did 3 of them, but they weren't able to do that with others. I mean, for those who haven't played, I mean, I don't believe, obviously, because that's my MO. I didn't finish Mirror's Edge, but I played quite a lot of it, and I mean, it's a very interesting, cool game. There's definitely flaws, but like some really fresh, to sound cheesy, fresh ideas in there. So, and that was from DICE, which was also like something that DICE wasn't used to doing. Doing original IP as well in that way, or new IP like that. So, but we got Dead Space. So,
yep. And now we're gonna play it for a few weeks. So let's dive right into this. I mean, I think we should start. Oh, and first we should also tie it back to Halloween. This was a Halloween release, as you pointed out in the pre-show. They really built up to like this scary game's coming out around Halloween. Woo!
Yeah. It was very like I watched the original trailer just to refresh my memory, and I didn't remember that, and it came out a couple weeks before, but it very much was this Halloween, and spooky whispering sounds, and which we'll talk about as we go. But it was very much horror movie, a trailer for a horror movie.
Yeah, which fits. And in fact, I mean, the sort of first thing that you're seeing in this game is our protagonist seeing, a video from, apparently, a woman with whom he has a relationship, Nicole, I think is her name. And something's off there. Things seem like they're not good for Nicole. And that is such a strange introduction to this game for me. I didn't remember that. I mean, I remembered that they were in like the bridge, but I didn't remember that there was a video of this woman right at the very beginning to sort of set the tone of like, everything is awful.
Yeah. The one thing I mean, it is strange. The one thing that I forgot about that I appreciate about the game is that I think this video is an example. It is, I want to say it's a very economically presented game, which sounds a little academic, and I don't think that's the best word, but it's very distilled down in a good way, where it's like the first thing you see is sort of quote unquote what's at stake, and yes, it's a damsel situation, so we can put that aside for a second, but and then and the next thing you see is them arriving, and then the next thing, and it's just very like everything's always clear on what's going on, and it's very distilled down versus, and I think we'll probably contrast this a lot as we play the game. You take a franchise like Resident Evil, which is in the same genre, and you're like, what? Why am I here?
Totally baroque.
Who is this person? Why? You're just constantly like
the whole game is you figuring out why the heck you're here.
Yeah. It's like it's an enigma wrapped inside of an enigma, but not a good one, it is because it's zany, but you know what I mean? This is just very like
the tone saves it, but yeah, this
pure.
is very
this
different.
Is like a pure. It's like I think it's just economical. I feel like is not the. It's not doing it.
Yeah, it feels pejorative. But it's direct.
It's direct. Yeah.
It's okay. There's not a lot of extraneous detail, which I love. There's like, okay, we're establishing something bad is happening in the place we're going. Okay, we've arrived near the place we're going. Okay, we can't communicate with them. Okay, we're going in closer. Oh no, we have to crash land. Like,
yeah,
it is like bing, 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 and that all happens in under two minutes. And it even has time for little character interactions, which I think that they're not particularly well.
Yeah, they're fine.
Enacted. I think the characters are a little too. They're not sympathetic enough to each other, like Hammond and what's her name?
Talking about Jurassic Park? No.
Captain Hammond and what's the other character's name? Zendra or Kendra?
Kendra. I think it might be Kendra. Yeah.
Okay, so those two, like, because we're talking with them a lot.
Yeah, they're very antagonistic toward each other.
They're so antagonistic, and it's a little too much, honestly. But I guess they're trying to draw those kind of very stark, different, lines, and it's also kind of direct. I just think that it's maybe a little too strong,
heavy-handed. Yeah, and they're trying.
But you're having moments even in this sort of section where they're clearly clashing. Like, oh, you don't want to do that. And he's like, I'm saving the ship, or whatever. It's like, wow.
It's some of that aliens coming in, right? Where it's like, I think they're trying to get some of that drama in there, but it's just a little bit ham-fisted. But but like you said, everything is doled out very specifically. And I mean this. I keep trying to give compliments, but it sounds like they're not compliments. But there's also, I think, in a good way, an element of you've seen this before. What's about to happen. It's like it's like this is one of those stories, and in a way, it's a good thing because you already have the tension built up of like, oh no, something bad is on that ship. I've seen Alien. I'm going to have to go to the ship and figure this out. I don't want to do that. It's really leaning into the type of horror, this space horror that it is, and so it's like the tropes are there, but like. Very daftly used,
deftly.
Deftly.
You definitely want deftly.
I definitely want to fix that one. Deftly used. Yes.
I mean, it's like the funny thing too is, of course, and we can maybe start getting into the character a little bit, is that you're going in there with like this cutting laser. So it's like, you're also like the Bill Paxton character going, what are we going to use, man? Harsh language? It's like you've got some janitor's tool, some engineering tool.
You don't even have that at first, right? You
don't even have that. Yeah, you're kind of like, you're in there and you're just like, I can use the computers. Like, they're telling me to use the computers. So it's you're also just you're not in there with a couple of guns strapped to each hip, and a space for one on the back that you're going to get, when you level up or whatever. You're going in there as kind of a thin, reedy looking guy in a weird welding helmet, with a lit up spine, which is strange, but also diegetically brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, when you don't know what any of it means yet, you're like, it's certainly striking, I will say. But I think it really works from that standpoint. But it's also just odd, like, what's going on here? But anyway,
it's funny that we just had finished playing Far Cry as well, right? With such a diegetic conversation happening there, and I guess it was just something about this era where people were trying to do that. But yeah, I mean,
and they can do science fiction diegetics here, so they can actually go further.
Yeah,
which is nice.
Yeah. The suit, I think, to your point about the welder's mask, it's like, it is such a it's such a cool character design and such a memorable, character design, and the armor specifically, and the mask is like iconic, right? It's essentially like the logo in a way right now for the franchise. But it still reads, there's a little Bioshockiness to it, in my opinion. But it still reads as a kind of a, like a maintenance guy. It's not, I mean, it's cool looking and it looks sort of combat-y, but it's like the boots are big and clunky, and it looks like somebody who's going to go outside and, do a spacewalk magnetized to the hull and go fix something, and weld it, which is a cool, kind of like play off of the usual trope of like the Space Marine going in with guns ablazing.
Right, but it also at the same time in its design calls back to like a knight or something, right? Because it looks literally kind of like a helmet like that. So it's also got like an everyman hero. We kind of talked about how we don't want to say he's an everyman, but it also has that sort of heroic touch to it in that mask, in that helmet thing, right? Because he's taking this big thing of metal with kind of like, cutouts that a helmet might have, even though they're different. It still has that kind of an echo of it. I was even just looking up Dante's Inferno because I'm like, did that also have this kind of look? It sort of does. It's more of a traditional like nose piece. I forget what those things are called that covers the nose in that helmet design. But it sort of has a similar. You can see it like it's like, oh, there's a little of that in here. That's 2 years later. So also by Visceral. So
yeah,
another original IP. Never played that one.
That was their God of War, offering.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so we have this, sort of non-heroic character in the sense of what he does and what his function is. He's the thing that I can't get over about him is he doesn't speak.
Yeah.
I just it's so strange to me, because it's a third person character, because I don't think that they would make the same choice today. I suspect that he would speak.
Well, we're about to find out.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I don't know what they'll do with a remake, but like, if
so
you were starting a new,
we're about to find out in two ways, which is the weirdest thing, right? Because Callisto Protocol, which we didn't talk about, Glenn Schofield, who was the creative director on this, is the creative director on the. Yeah,
that's true. Right when
sort of a spiritual remake.
And when we're finishing up this series, that game is supposed to be coming out. So maybe a bonus episode there at the beginning of December. Not saying for sure, but I could see it. It's I'm actually really curious about that aspect of it, because I've just recently finished. You were talking about Resident Evil. I just finished Village finally. I went back to it because it's spooky.
Oh, did you finish?
I thought I did. Yeah. Liked it a lot. Really, really enjoyed it, and almost went right in and started a new game plus or whatever. I was like, you know what, and went instead to Evil Within 2, which also has a protagonist who talks, right? And turning to this, I was like, it stood out so starkly. Like, oh yeah, these people talk to him over this comm interface, and he doesn't respond. It's very.
Yeah,
it's strange. I mean, I think they're trying to straddle the line of like a player insert character.
Yeah,
because you don't see. I mean, you do see his face at the very beginning, but you can quickly kind of forget it because he puts the helmet on pretty soon after.
And he is so blank faced in that opening scene. Yeah. Like if you're like, oh, whoa, Mister, are you okay? It's so weird.
He looks like B.J. Blazkowicz does at the beginning of the new Wolfenstein, where he's sitting in the wheelchair or whatever, and he's just like gone. He's very blank faced. It's a very funny thing. He looks shell shocked, like, oh my god, what's happening with Nicole?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty funny.
Do they?
I have actually played the second one as well.
Do they keep this up? I don't remember. I don't think I played the second one. So he's silent through all the games.
I believe so. Yeah, that's my recollection. He might scream in the scene where you have to drill a needle down into his eye. I don't remember.
Yeah.
That was quite a scene, I will say, playing that on stream a couple of years ago when I played some Dead Space 2, I think, at least. I think everybody said, yeah, don't play 3, and we don't talk about 3. I think that's where things came out on that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was very curious about it. Like, I might try to.
3 had some co-op stuff going on.
Did it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's some. My memory is they're doing some like co-op time, shifting kind of thing where it's like you're. But anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you've got this silent protagonist, but as we said, he's kind of he's the maintenance guy. He's not like heroic. He's not like BJ in the sense of having huge muscles.
He's thrown into the fire kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, it's just the 3 of us, which is a little bit weird that there's so few of them that came to help fix the ship. But I guess but anyway.
There's a couple other characters who are in the kind of.
Oh, that's room. Right. They die.
Yeah, they die like in there, and the 2 main characters get out, and the 2 nameless characters not so much. You definitely want to make sure you got a name on that ship if you want to survive. And then they're basically thrust into this alien versus plus the thing kind of environment. The creature design definitely is evocative of Carpenter rather than Alien, but the setting is definitely reflects Alien.
That's the other thing I was going to mention. We didn't talk about it in pre-show, but as a kind of a macro topic, and I think it goes a little bit to my kind of the economy of the game design and artistic design. It's a very good mixture of iconic space horror themes, but put together. It's kind of in the Blizzard school of thought, right? Of like you have this sort of like structure you're emulating, but you just put the right things together in the right places, and it kind of just square peg, square hole kind of situation, and you find the right ones. Because like you said, it's got the Carpenter feel, but it's also got the Alien feel. But I think they're put together in very nice ways where it still feels like I feel like a sense of place when I step into the ship immediately.
Yes.
Like everything is very cohesive, everything is very well put together and consistent, and and I believe it all, right? And then the monsters, I think so far at least, I don't remember exactly where the story goes. The monsters, fit okay too, largely because of the thing, but also the tone of it.
And the like you say with those spaces, they definitely it's not a Star Wars pastiche. I mean, it has some things in common with Alien, but not the spaces, at least at the beginning. Like when you're in that hangar, like there isn't a thing that feels exactly like that. It feels more like something out of maybe, I don't know, Sunshine or something like that. I don't know. That might even be later.
Yeah.
But like other ship designs, so it's like, there's something weird about those long, very long, like bridges, basically, in that space that feel a little strange.
What was that? Oh man, Event Horizon.
I
feel like
that too.
Yeah, Event Horizon must have been before this, right? I feel like it must have been a big influence.
Yeah.
Especially on, I think, where the story goes. But anyway, yeah. It's got its own. I'm definitely not trying to say it's fully derivative. In fact, the opposite. I think they're just pulling the right influences in the right places, and then I think they have created their own. I mean, because he is sort of the everyman maintenance kind of guy, and it's very much like you're seeing the maintenance corridors of these places, and you see the layers of all of that stuff happening. And it's got like it's not steampunk per se, but it's got that sort of like real metallic grounded. That's why I brought up BioShock. It's got like a very like heavy, everything feels heavy and metal, and It really great audio design because of that as well. But I think it fits well with him. You know what I mean? As a character, it's like that's what I mean by cohesive. It's like the character sits well in the world versus like a Jedi running through the space. You know,
right? Exactly.
It's just very, very cohesively put together.
There's like little access things all over the place, right? Of course, and that's where they're going to come from. But there's other, all the other elements fit as well as a result. Like there's lots of little things on the walls. That's actually, to talk about one thing we were kind of talking in pre-show about onboarding the different systems and everything. One of the things I was frustrated by in this initial section is that there's those things on the ground with little green dots on them. It's like, oh, I should be able to do something with those. And you can't until you've gone through and learned that you've been tutorialized on I had to come back out to learn I could stomp them.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going and trying to interact with these things. Like, what button do I press? It might be possible to press R2 there, but because I didn't have a gun or anything yet, I was like, well, that wouldn't make any sense to use the triggers. Little did I know, because I'd forgotten entirely what the controls were like. And I kept using the R3 and he put out his hand. I was like, well, maybe I have to stand over him and do this hand thing, because I forgot what that was doing. And it's like some light comes out of his hand, but it's not going anywhere yet because you don't have an objective yet. So there's like some things that are just not connecting with me there. And then there's a lot of things that are on the walls. And I'm like, oh, did I miss some of those?
Yeah.
Because when I finally noticed one, I was like, oh man, was this the first one? Oh no, I hope I didn't miss any.
Same thing.
Of course, feeling the completionist nature. So there are a little couple of things that in this initial section, I'm like, oh, I really wish they didn't put these things here, first of all. Leave the things that are on shelves or whatever, or in lockers that you can open. Good. Yeah, great. You can learn that thing. But these other things that you don't have the verbs for yet, they're not in the right place.
There's some forced tutorials.
Otherwise, the onboardings is really excellent.
Yeah.
So
they had a couple scripted moments with creatures that if you see them too early and you shoot them, they won't take damage because they want their scripted moment to finish. Those sorts of forced moments. I found one or two of those, but definitely not perfect. But I think going back to sort of the I'm hoping we can get someone on to talk, that worked on the game to maybe answer some of this stuff. But we had, just because of our game development community in the Bay Area at the time, we had people that we knew who had left LucasArts to go work at Visceral and at EA. And so a little bit of stories, heard over time from those folks. And my memory of some of that stuff is that, it's a little bit like the stories you hear from the original Star Wars film being made, right? Where constraints are a good thing for the creative process. And, I think my impression, and I think both Glenn and Ian Millam and others have talked about this openly, that, Dead Space was very much a passion project that was like the little engine that could, kind of in the corner. People were kind of like, oh, not sure what that's going to be or if it's going to be successful. And they did what they could, right? They used what they had, and they kind of had to be economical and efficient and cohesive and consistent. But because of that, it really forced a lot of, I think, good design, both visually and gameplay wise, where they just had to be clever with that stuff. And the onboarding doesn't fit all the time, but and then I think we'll eventually talk about the retread that they use to kind of extend the play time, but things are just very they just logical, and kind of go together well. And then on the side of sort of the visual design, I just feel like Isaac is the right person for the job. I think there's a term for it, but when you get a sense from a story or from some sort of entertainment piece where the protagonist is sort of the right one for the story. Do you know what I mean? And again, and I use Jedi because I kind of have a nit to pick about Jedi in general, but I think often Jedi are not the right one for the story. It's just they're Jedi, so they put them in, and it's like Jedi, who doesn't want to be a Jedi? I was like, well, it's not always Jedi. It's not always the tool you need for this, but in this case, it's just And I think because of their constraints, potentially it sounded like from both production realities, but also time, personnel, whatever it is, like they were really clever with how they used their resources. And I think it shows in a good way.
Yeah, he's really well situated in this environment. He's very, I mean, he's just in the right. He's just the right character. It's even though he is kind of bland in some sense, right? Particularly because he's not voiced. I think that there's not a lot of character that comes through in him as a person. But in terms of a role that he fits here and what capabilities he has because of those roles, like you compare this versus Alien Isolation, for example, it'd be a kind of, although is that first person? I feel like that's first person, but you're clearly in a specific character who is very specific in particular, and of course tied into the whole Alien universe, but actually isn't necessarily the right role, in some sense. I mean, the right role for that series, but not like the right role for what she's about to encounter. Whereas Isaac here is way more like not so much of a character, but is definitely the right role, which does, I think, make him a good insert character, right? For the player to feel like I have the right tools, like I was made for this. When you come into it, once you finally get the cutter.
Well, and you can see, I guess another way to put that in also what I was saying is you can see that once they decided that this is going to be about a maintenance worker, that the game formed around that concept. Right. What I mean? It's like,
what can a maintenance worker do?
Yeah. What kinds of things would they upgrade? Like, the suit is a big deal, right? Because it's like protects them in space, and it's they weld stuff and cut stuff, and there's metal everywhere, so it's got to be protective. And then what kinds of guns? It's like, well, they're not guns; they're things that cut metal. It's like, okay, well, if they're things that cut metal, how do they work on the enemies? You can just see this, like, it's just once you have one of those kernels of an idea like that, just things blossom from there. Again, not to sound cheesy, and I just love, and I'm a sucker. I mean, we're going to talk about Prey at some point, probably in the future episodes, but I think people know at this point, I'm a sucker for one single location stories and games like this, like System Shock 2. Our first game, go back and listen to Prey and this, and
a horror game set on a drifting ship. Oh.
Yeah. In fact, you mentioned Isolation. I think that might be my next stream game. It's one that I've been wanting to do. I played a few hours of it, but I'd want to play the whole thing. But anyway, I don't remember where we were, but I'm
that's okay.
I'm excited about how the pieces are all fitting together in this first section that we played, which we just played up through chapter 1, by the way. So you get the tutorialization of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely love too that he's also at the same time advancing the other two characters' story, right? It's like, we need to get to the bridge. Hey, we need you to go basically turn on the tram, and it's like, of course they do. Like as soon as they got on the ship, they were ordering him to open stuff and okay, get into here so that we can do the yada yada, and investigate. No, let's get the power on, or just whatever. Immediately it's like, okay, well, we need to go do this, so we need you to go and do the thing, and that's just that just can propel a story along, right? Is having that connection of, hey, these other people need your skills, so you feel needed immediately as well, which is a good motivation for a player. And it's not because I mean, even though it is a power fantasy, because of course you're going to take out all these aliens on the way, at the same time, it's kind of not, because you're not empowering yourself to do this, at least at first, right? And we'll see how that changes over time. But there's sort of I'm in here doing the job, and oh my gosh, this is bad, but I still got a job to do, and it's just a very natural, character motivation to kind of put on the player, which I think works really, really well and sets up the whole game from the very beginning,
Well, he's somebody who has given orders not, I mean, that's, he goes and does a job, and I think they're giving him, and they seem to be, at least the one of them seems to be sort of military-ish, and then the other one maybe they're both military, or I don't know. No, I guess the other one, because Kendra says, I think her name is Kendra, says that in the beginning, she says at one point that she and Isaac can fix the ship or whatever. So Isaac must work for her or something. But anyway, like, yeah, I mean, it's it's the ludonarrative dissonance. There isn't much going on here, because the reason you came to the ship is sort of like what you end up needing to do, at least for now, right? Like, you're doing the thing so that's not like there's a bit of fish out of water. Like, I'm a maintenance worker, not an alien hunter, but there's also like, well, I'm using the tools I have. I'm going and fixing trams. The tram objective is one of those nice, simple, semi-brilliant objectives, because it's also what unlocks the rest of the ship for you, so you have this cool. Really good sense of empowerment of like, I did that, now I can go anywhere, and so can everyone else, but oh no, now I can go anywhere because I don't want to go find these other creatures. So it's like great survival horror tension for sure. I don't know, it's just just fits together really well.
It really does. Yeah,
we should talk about the UI a little bit.
Yes, that was the last thing I wanted to make sure we hit. So not only is sort of his health, and then ultimately his stasis. We'll talk about the stasis gun and stuff like that later on. But the so he has sort of like information about him right on his back. I think the gun also, you can see when you go to aim, you can see how many shots are on it. But then there's also just other UI that's just kind of projected into the world. This may not be the first time that was seen, but it definitely, I think, is the influential one. And when I was saying earlier on in the episode, like, that I didn't remember what was important about this, as soon as I saw those, I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing. That was immediately, I was like, of course it's that. I had just forgotten, because I sometimes don't remember where those elements come from. But as soon as the very first thing where I saw where it popped up, I was like, oh my God, yeah, right. 3D cards in the world, basically, for the UI, which make a lot of sense in a science fiction setting, that you're just basically able to, project stuff, like
hologram,
hologram, like we did from visors in Republic Commando, right? Is like, you can see stuff because it's in your visor. But here it's like, it makes sense that these things would be something that could be projected out, maybe from that little thing that's in front of him. I'm not really sure how it's supposed to work.
I think they have an origin for it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's something like that. Yeah, it's just, it's really neat. And I think you mentioned welding, but I think they've been on record saying that was a big influence, because that plate that's on his chest is, I think, like a welding shield kind of thing too going on there, or something. But
it prevents sparks from coming
up.
I
think so. Yeah, I might be totally misremembering, but But yeah, I mean, even his, like, the map, basically the tab screen for me, or the start screen, whichever button it is, but inventory, map, objectives, and I forget the fourth one, but like, it's right in real space. It's right in the game space, and it's like mapped on these, on these polygons, and it's super awesome. It's just right there. And when and the other cool one is when those characters, when you get your radio messages from those other characters, it's like, that movie is projected on a plane. It's in 3D space. You can kind of like parallax it around as you're watching it. And then
it's also good. It's good for those movies that it's in a smaller window too, because they can compress them down as well. So that's there's a nice technical benefit to that as well.
Again, a constraint, right? That's another constraint coming in, saying like, how do we make a movie efficiently enough? And that's
and they don't have to be ultra high resolution and look amazing. Like, everything doesn't have to be at the production quality of the opening scene, which was good for its day, right? So
and I mean, the other sort of like, I think, implied tension behind the diegetic nature of this stuff, which we talked about probably a fair amount in Dark Souls, is when those things are in 3D space and you're bringing up that menu, you're still in control. So in a survival horror world, you're hypothetically still vulnerable, right? And so there's that tension of like, oh, I got to open my inventory, but can something come and get me, kind of stuff, And so they can play upon that as well, whether that was fully intentional or not, aspect of it, because they do have you can still pause and stuff, but and we'll talk about save system another time, but which I think is retained in the PC. We had the Far Cry 2 conversation about that, but so far I think it's the same throughout. It's the same as console.
It should be the same. There's not a save anywhere.
There's not a save anywhere that I found. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I've learned my lesson. I honestly
think it would probably affect it less, honestly, because I think there's a lot of them. First of all, I mean, you basically be like, the risk would be you would save in a place where you're like, I don't have a lot of ammo. How am I going to get through this type of situation? I think
the tension, though, in a survival horror game, the tension probably would, for me at least, would go down some, right? Because it's like, until I know where the next one is, I'm not sure what I'm going to meet, But I do have a lot of ammo right now, so we'll see how that goes over time. But yeah, I mean, just the UI and all the just funny that we're talking about both these games back to back, but the diegetic nature of all this stuff in a sci-fi world, super impressive. And I do think, to your point, like, we don't remember the first game that really like was the trailblazer, but the sort of semi-infamous example in our domain, when it comes to who is the innovator in something, it often, unfortunately, comes down to the one that was most memorable rather than the one that did it first. And the example that always comes up with that is Gears of War. The sticky cover, like, they got the credit for the sticky cover, stop and pop and that sort of stuff when it wasn't Killzone.
Killzone?
No, it wasn't Killzone. It was Kill something else.
Kill Bill.
There was another game before Gears of War that did that. That nobody knows. Almost nobody knows, because Gears of War was the one that. No, and again, I don't know if maybe they just happened to find it at the same time. I don't even know if Gears of War was influenced by it, but in this case, it's like, regardless of who did it first, like, Dead Space is the one where, like, oh yeah, that's the game where the UI is all in the world, because it's just so memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's like, you've probably heard the adage, good artists borrow, great artists steal, and what they mean by that is that when you take something, if you're a great artist, you make it your own. Like, you do it in such a way that it is distinctive to you, even though you took the idea, and all ideas are taken from somewhere else. There are very, very, very rarely unique ideas. But stealing like an artist means taking a thing and literally taking ownership of it, because you bring such a fresh look at it that it literally becomes distinguishable as your own. And I think this UI really kind of nails it that way. And as you said, it's right there on the first, it's even on the first screen, when you hit new game, it's like floating in space, I mean, it's in an abstract space, but it's right there in space, and so's the 5-1, by the way. I will say this one is a great 5-1 game. I was sitting on my couch like, oh man, this is really good. I'd forgotten. So
the audio design, we're going to have to talk a lot more about as we go, for sure, because it's
so critical to horror. So.
Yeah, and they do such a good job. I mean, we'll talk about jump scares along the way too, but there's so little going on in the world often, but audio makes it seem like there's so much more going on in this game. So
the game you're looking for, by the way, Kill Switch.
Kill Switch, that's it. Thank you for looking that up. Kill Switch. Well, not only that, but the title screen, you can tell by the way it's rendered on polygons, right? And you can see the textures and some of the aliasing and stuff. But even the title screen was built in Engine, right? It's not it looks to me like it's not. I mean, the movie might be playing on a polygon, but the polygon is there. They could have made that, crystal clear if they wanted to. So it's just, they're, full circle to the top of the episode. They committed to the bit.
They committed to the bit, and we appreciate that here. At least, half of the Tims do.
Yeah.
So
no, I appreciate it too. I don't know if that's what you mean, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. Me teasing? Huh. Go figure. All right. Well, let's put a pin in it there. We'll probably do like a couple more chapters or something each week. I feel like there's like 7 or 9 chapters or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
I remember it being longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it is a little longer than expected. I mean, there's some market demand there, and we'll talk a little bit about how the structure elongates it, in some positive and negative ways. I think that'll be interesting to discuss in the future. You see a little bit of it here, but we will see even more of it, I think, as we go on, as I recall. So it'll be worth talking about for sure. But let's first turn to reviews and email. We didn't have tons of emails built up, but I do want to first actually read a review that's been sitting around here for a while. A few weeks ago. Hopefully it is still in my feedly. It is short and sweet, and I knew it complete. It is just a great show from Max42357, if that is your real name. It just simply says, Brett and Tim seem like wonderful people, and it's a pleasure to walk through some of the best games with them. And that's very kind, and we thank you, Max42357. I mean, I can't vouch for him, but I seem like a wonderful person. That's true.
I can neither confirm nor deny that statement.
Yeah, no, we've pulled one over on Max 43 or 42357. But those who've stuck around for a long time know that we're just a couple of guys who remember what we remember and don't do any research. But I'm glad you all joined us on this journey. We do love discussing the games, even if we don't know everything about them. So, okay, let's turn to email. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. As is customary, sir, I sent you the first one.
Okay. Why did I read this one last? Maybe I just read ahead and we didn't read it on air.
I may have sent it a while ago because I think we have had this a while, so it's possible you have seen it before. Yes.
Okay. All right. The one from Raymond.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Random subject is random stuff mail, SimCity, Far Cry 2, and a YouTube channel recommendation from Raymond. Hi, Raymond. Hi, Brett and Tim. I keep forgetting to write in, so sorry for the random dump again. He's efficient with his emails. He gets a lot in there. Yep. SimCity 2000. Me and my brothers. Are you sure I didn't read this one already? I feel like, but I'm going to keep going. Shared a family computer growing up, so there was there inevitably was a bit of trolling going on. In SimCity's case, this would usually amount to loading a save file, unleashing as many disasters as possible, and then saving again. Okay, I did read this. I did. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's some next level early aughts, whatever, or 90s trolling. Far Cry 2 subject. Listening to the pod made me realize I've never beat Far Cry 2, and IIRC, I always forget what that means.
If I recall
correctly, right. Which I never recall correctly, so I never use that acronym. It's mostly thanks to the same frustrations that Tim and Brett to a lesser extent is having. The goofy healing animation will always stick with me, especially when you were shot multiple times, but all your character had to do was digging one bullet out of his hand. As someone with aphantasia, lack of mental imagery, I'm glad that maps like Far Cry 2's is the exception, not the rule. The only thing Far Cry 2 has going for it is that at least 2 shows you are on the map, and the ones that don't even have that can go screw. So I'm not sure I wrote any of that correctly. I lost the thread on that. Okay, so I guess I'll move on. I keep expecting this to be brought up, and I may have just missed it. A young up and comer has started a YouTube channel called Masahiro Sakurai. Oh, okay. Sakurai on creating games. He keeps his videos short, his presentations good, and he covers a broad range of topics while keeping each video focused on a single theme. I'd say they're worth checking out. In all seriousness, even though everyone who listens to this pod has probably at least heard some of the things he's covered, some of it is just good to hear again, and I think everyone would get at least some takeaways from the video. Regards, Raymond. He goes on. I guess it's a PS.
There was a second email, so I just
put them together.
Added it in at the bottom. Yep.
Listening to Clint Hawking interview, I realized I forgot to include how Far Cry 2 is one of my favorite games. My friend's group actually played the multiplayer at LAN parties for a while, and it often devolved into a special kind of chaos thanks to the fire physics plus exploding ammo caches. While I'm mad at the South African accent in games, will always at least earn a chuckle from me, and Far Cry 2 has some of the great examples of the medium, plus some of the enemy barks can be comedy gold if you know Afrikaans.
Yes. Afrikaans, yeah.
And then he puts links to the stuff. So sorry, butchered that one sentence, but didn't quite grok it there.
It's fine. We'll clean it up in post. That little anecdote about hearing Afrikaans in it and being amused reminded me of a story I heard once, possibly apocryphal, about a film that was filmed in Polynesia, and they needed a character to run in and say something to like this king, in the local language, and he ran in and they were like, we don't care what you say. We're going to subtitle it with whatever we want, to convey what you're saying. So just come in and say something that sounds like your language.
Oh,
right?
No.
And so the guy, and they make the film, they finish the film, they're screening the film, and they ultimately get screened, in a place that speaks this language. And everybody laughs at this dire line that the guy is saying, which is something about like how the volcano's about to explode type of thing, right? And the whole audience starts laughing because what the guy actually said was, "I'm not being paid enough for this job." So I'm sure there's a lot of that when folks are yelling things out in languages that the voice directors do not understand. I like that. That's a story I heard a long, long time ago. So I'm probably missing some details, but anyway, sure. But yeah, the chaos for this would make it a good multiplayer game for sure. Like,
yeah, we didn't talk about that at all, but it did have a bit of a cult following in the multiplayer side of things.
Yeah, all of Clint's games have, I think, or at least Splinter Cell did as well, because it had that sort of asymmetric multiplayer mode, at least for, I think, Chaos Theory. I don't know if it was in the first one. Yeah, something I would like to see someday. I didn't play it at the time. All right, I have one more, and then we'll call it a night. This one is, the subject is simply Far Cry 2. It's from Jafool. I'm reading it because it says, Tim said, when he thinks of Far Cry 2, he thinks of the diegetic design choices. While I agree, a second thought also pops into mind. Permadeath. This game has a history of inspiring players to do self-enforced permadeath runs. It was in the zeitgeist at the time. At least Minecraft was popular for it off the top of my head. But more directly, it came from Clint Hawking and Manver Hare discussing ethics in games when a player can just do things differently if they don't like the result. Since the popularity of it at the time, permadeath has always been an intriguing thought. And then he has some links with some more info, with some great stories. There's some that are quite long. I actually mentioned this had jarred my memory, but I did mention this in the follow-up to one of the interviews, which, I think this email came in right before we talked to Clint, and I might have mentioned it afterwards. But yeah, I actually knew Ben Abraham, was at the time an Australian I think he was in graduate school, but he was also a sort of a video game blogger, like a lot of us were. That's how I knew him, and he did a very involved, like over 100 pages write up of his permadeath run in Far Cry 2, which is extraordinary to read. I mean, it's a lot of pages, but it's also there's images and stuff, so it's not 100 single spaced, hard to read pages. There it does break up a little bit, and I definitely remember that being a thing at the time. And I appreciate you, Fool, poking my memory on it, because I had forgotten in the moment while we were playing it, but this definitely jarred my memory. And we'll put these links in as well that are about different ways to play the games. It's always great to see the extra lives that games have because of how they inspire players. So
yeah,
I love how Far Cry 2 inspires players. I am inspired by Dead Space, of course. Do you know what I am inspired to do with Dead Space? I bet you can guess.
No, I can't guess. Not coming to me.
Cutter only, man. It's got to be cutter only.
Oh yeah. As soon as I opened up the upgrade menus for the cutter, I'm like, yeah, Brett's probably just going to use the cutter. Which to be honest, I was thinking of as well. I mean, I think it feels like
a game
that supports it well. Yeah, that it's like a bread and butter kind of situation versus like a wrench or something, which seems a little, goes a little too far. But also I think BioShock supports that too. But
no, there are guns in the game that you can purchase, and I think you can even get them in that first store. And instead, I just spent it on another power node. I'm like, yeah, get me those upgrades. Because I think the laser cutter gets pretty good, and the more you use it, the more comfortable you are at aiming it. I'm having the same experience I had when I first played it, which was like, man, I cannot find the joints on these things, to cut them apart. And I'm, I know I will get better at that. So I'm like trying to power up that weapon so that when I do get good at it, it'll feel really, really good.
Yeah.
So,
maybe I'll go a different direction then just to get a little bit of contrast, but
up to you.
But
up to you. I think it's worth playing that way.
All
right. Well,
do you, speaking of Extra Life, do you want to?
Oh yeah, we should totally talk about that actually. And I will also mention Artemage's. So I will not read his letter, but I want to point out, and I'll read it next week, I think, because it's not until after ours. But Artemage is again doing his Drunk Souls, I believe, in the middle of November. We won't be able to stop in because we'll be traveling at the time, but he will be doing that. We'll read about it next week on the show. But we are actually doing an Extra Life thing this coming Saturday. That's terrifying. Do you want to describe a little bit what we're doing?
Yeah, I can't wait. So we have a mutual friend that we play Dungeons and Dragons with, and
we've had her on the show.
Oh yeah, Lanny's been on the show. Yeah, so Lanny Lum, everyone has heard. Well, not everyone, but potentially on our Ocarina of Time. She came on as a guest to give her Zelda perspective. But yeah, so she and some coworkers are doing an Extra Life. I think some handful of ex-Monolith folks and I think some other developers have jumped in, including ourselves. And so because we play Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit right now, and Lanny plays with us, and Joel and Troy, who are two other friends that we play with. So we're going to do a one-shot that Brett is going to DM, and we are going to play. And yeah, it's going to be, I think it's Halloween-y themed, right?
Yes, it is. It is going to be, it's got spooky elements for sure. And it's going to be this coming Saturday, the 5th. I will tweet about it. I believe it's the 5th. I'll tweet about it and give times and streams and all of that. I think I'm going to be hosting it. So you'll probably be able to find it through my Twitch page. I'm not sure how all that works. I think they basically host my stream into theirs. I think that's how those sorts of things work. So we're going to be doing that, and I look forward to doing it. I know what I'm doing, and I have not written it up and prepared it yet. So we shall see how it goes. It has been a busy few days. But I'm really looking forward to running it. If for any reason that becomes impossible for me to pull off, we'll probably fall back on Tim's long running campaign, where I play, and so does Lanny and the other two folks mentioned. So that's my backup plan. Is okay. I can't do it. I have a goofy idea that I can't wait to do. So it's all coming together, but it's just a question of my time this week. I think I should be able to do it. So it should be fun and different.
Well, that's good for me to know, because then I will need to be prepared.
Well, I will give you more than 20 minutes of heads up.
Yeah, all right.
At least 25. So yes,
but it's
so
much easier for me to prepare for then. Yeah.
Yes,
but we're talking one shot, so it's like a 3-hour stint. So it's exactly not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing our normal 3-hour Saturday session, but we're doing a one shot this time. So, and yeah, it doesn't mean I have to, create a huge arching thing. So it's a whole thing to do. But yeah, you can find us there. I'll put the link on the Twitter and all of that. Speaking of which, you can send us, of course, reviews and email. We love to get them and appreciate reading them on the show to devgameclub@gmail.com or on the Apple podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts. Just shoot us a line if it's not through the Apple stuff, because we do love to read them and read them on the show. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. We can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
You can also find him streaming at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. and apparently this weekend me streaming at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. You have smashed down the bed of chaos, I gather.
Yep, I killed that bug.
What? That is such a weird.
I didn't. Yeah, basically, I was just kind of practicing for the stream essentially, and like doing some grinding, and then I just finished it. So I was like, oh, okay,
yeah, I guess I'm done with that.
Not gonna redo that. I can't redo that.
Nope,
this game's
it's gone.
So weird.
It's behind you now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
so you have
Grave Lord Nito is next, and I am there. I did one attempt on him, but I stopped at that point.
Okay.
So
that'll be what folks maybe see next week. Hopefully. Awesome. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo and merch store are by Mark Garcia. You can find that through our pinned tweets. Have fun wandering the halls of a ghost ship this week, and good night.
Good night.